as someone who is on the margins, especially when you're talking about like societal structures and shit like that, it's very interesting to watch. I'm gonna focus on like cis straight men. It's very interesting to watch some of them create and perpetuate problems and then come on social media and then complain about the shit.
Here's please. Baby, don't you wanna come excite me? Sink your teeth into it, don't tread lightly. I'm dripping what you know.
So this TikTok kind of went viral on a lot of the social media platforms that I frequent, and I wanted to talk about it. The premise of it just starts out with somebody asking a question: who do you talk to when you're at your lowest point, essentially? And a lot of men, or a lot of the responses were compiled, and they were from men compiled in this TikTok, as you can see. I don't want to play the actual audio because I think some of the music might be copyrighted or whatever. But yeah, they were essentially saying, a lot of men in this were essentially saying like, because I'm a man, I ain't got nobody to talk to. Of course I have nobody to talk to. I'm a man. I speak for all the guys when I say this. We don't have nobody to talk to. And two ways of thinking about this popped in my head. There's the first way I see it, where there are obviously some men who understand what's going on, they see what's happening. Even if they weren't aware before, they're aware now of how toxic masculinity works against even their own selves. Like, as much as people critique it based off of how toxic masculinity affects all those around and all those who have to deal with somebody spewing that shit out, there are also critiques about the way that toxic masculinity affects the actual person, right? So there are some men who are no doubt aware of all of that, and they're doing their best to try and change that shit, to try and change the way that they think. I think like we all, especially just growing and gaining more knowledge about the world and the way society works and all of that, I think we all should want to work to unlearn whatever bullshit that doesn't serve us, that doesn't serve the people around us, right? You know, I think there are men who are doing that, right? But then there's another kind of man that I want to talk about, where it's just like, you think about how much pushback, you know, people who critique toxic masculinity, people who talk about the dangers of all that sexist, patriarchal shit. Like, and you think about how much pushback these people who talk about these issues get from some of these men, right? Some of these men are just like, well, girl, I'm alpha male. I don't want to be, you know, out here like no beta, you know, all that bullshit that they talk. Also, you have this overarching idea that expressing yourself, expressing your emotions as a man, I mean, unless it's fucking anger or something, unless it's rage, you know, expressing your emotions is like, it's like gay. It's like for women, it's feminine. It's not seen as something manly. I've even seen how some men make fun of the idea of safe spaces or whatever, and now they're on social media crying out for one, right? So those are the type of men who don't get no pity or no sympathy from my ass, because it's like, when someone approaches them with a different way of doing things, with like, okay, yeah, just because men did this shit for 10 trillion years, doesn't mean that, first of all, number one, it ain't hurting the rest of the planet, it ain't hurting y'all, and it doesn't mean that we can't find better ways to do some shit. But with some of these men, when you talk about their old ass, stupid ass traditions that hurt them, you know what I mean? When you talk about the fact that, okay, so why is it seen as, oh, you're seen as a pussy, or you're seen as lame as fuck, or it's seen as womanly or whatever, to cry, to open up about basic human shit, right? Like, when these critiques are aimed at toxic masculinity, you have some of these men coming out here saying, oh, that's what happened, feminism, you know, and it's like, okay, but we're trying to tell you that the ways in which y'all bottle up y'all emotions to try and seem like you the macho-ass motherfucker in the locker room, you know what I mean? To try and seem like you the hardest nigga in the, it's not even serving you. It's not even serving you. And that's why y'all get on TikTok, y'all get on these social media platforms crying out for safe spaces. Oh, we ain't got nowhere to be ourselves. We ain't got no place to be vulnerable. But it comes off as really fucking disingenuous. It comes off as stupid as hell when those kinds of things, when those kinds of statements come from the same kinds of men that will not accept any kind of critique, any kind of, okay, well, how about we go about it differently? When we're talking about the traditions of men, the way that men are socialized, the way that they are, you know, prompted or encouraged to act like the only emotion they should be expressing is fucking rage or anger. you know? And then they take that, you have these whole conversations about how they're trying to take the strength out of men. They're trying to emasculate men and take their masculinity away. It's just like, why is masculinity always tied to dysfunction? Why is it always tied to rage? Why is it always tied to hiding your fucking feelings? Acting like you don't have feelings as a human being? Why is it always tied to not showing any type of emotional outburst that doesn't revolve around punching a fucking wall? Why does masculinity always have to be tied to stoicness? Acting like you don't feel. How are you expecting to be able to have deep conversations, deep relationships, a deep connection with somebody, and you can't even connect with yourself, your own emotions? You don't even know what you want as a human being. And then you're just like, oh, well, girl, y'all have people to talk to, y'all, but we don't. As a guy, we don't. It comes off as like, girl, y'all made y'all bed, and it's time that you lay in it. And if you don't want to, I'm not saying that, bitch, you're the same man who existed 10,000 years ago, and you're the same one who implemented this shit. But men are the ones who did this shit. And if they are so uncomfortable with it, they should be, number one, okay with critique. Okay with people saying, hey, this is how the way that y'all have been socialized, the way that y'all do shit is hurting other people, hurting other populations, and hurting yourselves. They should be okay with hearing that. They should be okay with just finding other ways or being open to listening to other ways to go about living life as a guy, right? But here we have some of these same men, like I said, who don't want to accept that, who don't want to look at it, who don't want to see it for what it is, who are trying to say that you're taking they're taking masculinity away. No, we're trying to take the dysfunctional bullshit out of y'all's definition of what masculinity is, even though, like, if you want to go personally with me, you want to go further with me, like, what even is masculinity? What even is that shit? What is who decided what the rules are? So that's a whole nother thing. But at the basic level, keep it really cute for y'all. We're trying to remove the dysfunctional bullshit out of masculinity. Why, for example, like I said before, why does rage, why is anger seen as something that's like, oh yeah, that's masculine? Why is it? Have these men stopped to ask themselves that question? Why is something like nurturing and caring for something, growing something, learning, communicating without overstepping, over speaking, being silent and just listening, why is that seen as something feminine? Nurturing. Why is that seen as? So like, they won't even sit down and ask themselves these basic questions, and then get up here on social media talking about, oh, we ain't got nobody to talk to. Like, yeah, because y'all are still, men measure other men. A lot of these men measure other men's manliness and manhood like it's a dick measuring competition, and whoever folds, whoever's crying the most, whoever's being a pussy or whatever, they get fucking ridiculed by the standards created by men. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, in order to undo this, or in order to approach this shit from a different perspective, in order to get the deep connections that they want, they're going to have to let go of some of these ideals of masculinity. It just is what it is. It is what it is. And I think a lot of men, hear that and they imagine somebody like me, I guess. they imagine that conversation meaning that, bitch, they got to put on skirts and fucking and tutus and shit. I don't know. But it's like, we're just trying to encourage healthier ways of communication. Like, we're trying to encourage people to have higher EQs, you know what I mean? To have higher levels of emotional stability and understanding when it comes to, like, not only interacting with others, but interacting with yourself, right? So that just came across my mind because it was like, I saw these men complaining, and I'm thinking about, like, my adolescence and the culture in college, especially if you just, I peered over and saw all that shit the frat boys was doing. I was just like, okay, you know what I mean? So just thinking about all of that and thinking about how men measure other men's manliness and try to do, it's like a competition, and thinking about all of the ways in which they inhibited themselves from expressing themselves emotionally, and then on top of that, rejecting any kind of reform when it comes to, like, just dealing with and talking about masculinity and the performance of it, right? They don't even want it to be touched, because when you touch the definition of masculinity, some of them have built their whole self-esteems off of that. So when you start touching that, when you start playing with masculine and moving shit away and adding shit, like, they don't know what the fuck to do. They don't know what to do. And instead, like I said, instead of dealing with, I'm sure this process is uncomfortable or strange for them, instead of just dealing with that strange and uncomfortable process and learning more and reading more, they just get on here and complain. And I'm just like, man, the people who you are insulting, were actually the ones who are trying to get you on a different path, the same path you claim to want now. And I personally think that until men are willing to change the standard of what it means to be masculine, and like I said, I think that all that shit is bullshit. I think that it shouldn't matter, like I said, who came up with what is masculinity. Like, that shit is there, but like, we just gonna deal with them where they at. I think that if unless men are willing to change what it means to widen the categories of what it means to be masculine or man or whatever, or improve the socialization of men, until they're willing to accept critique, to see the damage that can be done, like I said, both to themselves and to the community, to the world around them, based off of these like archaic, weird, sexist, fucked up, repressing definitions of what masculinity is. Like, unless they're willing to accept that shit and change it, and because they're the only ones who can, then they're just gonna be dealing with this shit of emptiness, not having real friends, and bottling your shit up for the rest of your life, and for the generations to come if you don't change the shit now. So yeah, I mean, it sucks for y'all that y'all don't have no friends. It sucks, but y'all the only ones who can change that, and you have to be willing to be seen as different. You have to be willing to be seen as the weird one until it's not weird anymore, I guess. Or you have to be willing to remove yourself from these situations or friendships or relationships in general that require you to be this caricature, to be this thing that is masculinity or manhood, and not yourself as a human being, even if all your characteristics don't line up with what it means to stereotypically be masculine or a man. Like, you have to be willing to be something new, to be something different. And until men are, it's never gonna happen for that. It's always gonna be like this. And yeah, so I mean, I don't know what to tell them other than y'all gonna have to do something differently. y'all gonna have to do something differently. I really wanna know what y'all think about this, because it had a lot of people talking, a lot of people debating. And like I said, some people were like, oh, well, some women do that. Some women look at their sons and say, don't cry, suck it up. And, you can't cry. Boys don't cry, men don't cry. Like, yes, they do say, some women do say that. But girl, the standards are patriarchal, and men came up with that, and men love to enforce and reinforce and measure it and, dictate who is a real man, who ain't a man because of it. So it's like, until that shit changes, all the rest of it is going to remain the same. So yeah, I'd love to know what y'all think. If you like hearing me talk, make sure you go to my Patreon at patreon.com/AdrianExpression. New podcast episodes go up there every Tuesday, informed by what the patrons want me to talk about. I love y'all so much, and make sure that you have a good goddamn evening.
Don't play with me. Don't play with me. Don't play with me.